Lightning flashed across the city, and it practically reached modern houses. Thanks to the loudspeaker, the news spread among the people that a popular phone store was closed, and therefore all new mobile phones in the store where the sound came from would be discounted. The young man who shouted this advertisement hoped that at least someone would buy a phone from him. It turned out that the hero was unable to sell a single phone for a month, so he is trying as best he can to lure customers. On TV at that time they said that cases of missing young girls had recently become more frequent in the city. And while the news was promising rewards for those who provided evidence, the seller was thinking about warning Wang Wei. The young man called the girl, calling her dear, and asked if she was at work. But, unexpectedly, Wang Wei told the main character that they needed to break up, which the guy did not expect at all. It turned out that the girl abandoned the young man, because in 3 years he had not earned a penny in his store. The seller tried to dissuade Wang Wei, promising that he would find the money to buy the house. However, the heroine no longer wanted to listen to anything, and simply suggested that they forget each other. Of course, the main character tried to dissuade his beloved in some way, but she simply dropped the call. So the young man was left all alone, standing in his mobile phone store. The lightning continued to rage, and the weather seemed to only get worse. At that moment, the seller decided that his ex-girlfriend would regret what she had done. After this, the young man went out into the street, shouting that if he did not earn money for everything in 3 years, then let lightning strike him. And then something happened that the young man could not have expected, because lightning actually struck him. Lee Sing-hee decided that this was a sign that he was destined to remain a poor bachelor for the rest of his life. And then someone asked the guy what was wrong with being single. However, the main character was sure that he was alone, so he began to look around in surprise. When the seller did not notice anyone, he began to ask the stranger to come out of hiding. And after that, a gray-haired old man appeared in front of the young man's eyes, wearing strange clothes. The unknown person introduced himself as the immortal heavenly god of thunder, and then he asked the young man whether he dared to call him. Lee Sing-hee decided that it was Thor, and then he was surprised, because it seemed that the god should look a little different. Then the seller also introduced himself, and then asked the old man what he was doing in the phone store. The immortal thunder god became interested when he heard about mobile phones. It turned out that the old man's phone was broken, and so he began to ask the seller to show God the assortment. The young man was happy because he finally had a chance to sell something. Lee Sing-hee began to show God different models, saying that he was ready to make a discount. But then the old man said that this was not a telephone at all, and then asked what this thing was called. God began to shout at the guy because he dared to deceive Ben Xian, and then took out an old telephone. The immortal's phone was so old it looked like it had been bought from a museum. After that, the old man replied that he still had something to do, so he would buy a mobile phone from the guy in the future. Then God disappeared, and Lee Sing-hee began to think that this madman might have superpowers. And then the seller noticed that the old man managed to break more than half of the mobile phones, and did not even pay for it. Unexpectedly, the young man's mobile phone lit up, and the guy began to hope that Wang Wei had changed her mind. However, on his phone the main character saw some kind of heavenly list that he knew nothing about. Then the guy received a message that an order had been received to gather Dianmu Tianjie. It turned out that Ben Xiang left heaven and did not return, and if anyone provided information about him, he would receive a reward. It was then that the young man realized that the old man was not crazy, but a real god of thunder. A chat appeared in front of the young man, where the other gods were discussing the disappearance of one of them. Lee Sing-hee wrote to this chat about seeing Ben Xiang in his store. After this, the seller also shared that God ruined a lot of his goods, so he is waiting for compensation for the damage. Then the young man was offered to open a store in the immortal world, but the guy did not know whether it would make sense. After this, the main character was sent a reward, as promised for any information. The young man was surprised that he actually received merit points because he didn't say that much. They explained to Lee Sing-hee that these points could be used to buy many things from the heavenly list, but the most expensive items were vintage mobile phones, which did not look their best. And since even antique phones cost a lot of money, then smartphones could be sold well. Then the seller noticed a golden pill that could instantly increase strength, and the guy had enough points for it. Then the young man decided to order this product, and after that his hands began to go numb and his phone began to vibrate. After this, the golden pill ended up directly in the young man's hands, which was surprising. The smell of this pill was terrible, like a pig barn that had not been ventilated for a month. Although it smelled strongly, the guy noticed that he began to feel much better. The young man felt more energetic, and it seemed that some changes were taking place in his body. So, despite the smell, the pill really did look like a magic pill. Lee Sing-hee had already begun to dream about how he got everything thanks to the incense of this elixir. And then the seller heard strangers discussing whether a beautiful girl would go this way, and whether they were standing correctly. Considering the fact that girls began to disappear in the city, they could be criminals, so the young man decided to stop them. The seller knew that if he could provide evidence and identify the suspects, he would become rich. And while the strangers were further discussing their plan, the young man quietly crept up to them. Lee Sing-hee decided to take photographs of the crime and then call the police in order to eventually receive a reward. The villains had already begun to doubt whether the one they were expecting would come, but then she appeared in front of them. The unfortunate woman was immediately surrounded by strangers, asking her why she was walking alone at such a late hour. But the beauty turned out to be not simple, because she was not at a loss, and immediately threatened the police. And then the main character realized that it was a girl who was recognized as a beauty and a genius of the college where he studied. After that, the poor woman immediately began to say that she had personal security. But the guys had been watching her for a week, so they knew that this was a lie. The heroine was unable to escape, because there were many more attackers, so she was captured. And then Lee Sing-hee appeared, telling Miss Yu that he was coming, which surprised the criminals. However, the girl said to this that the seller should leave immediately, and everything would be fine with her. Then the attackers decided that the young man was Yu's hidden guard. Meanwhile, the young man calmly extended his hand to the heroine, inviting her to go home. Although Miss didn't remember Lee Sing-hee, she decided that she would be safer with him. The four criminals calmly released the girl, and also apologized to the seller. But Yu understood that the guy didn't look like a bodyguard at all, so she was worried that the villains would guess everything. And the Miss's assumptions turned out to be correct, because the criminals realized that the guy was just a salesman. The heroine wanted to know the name of the young man, but he replied that first he needed to go as far as possible. However, the young man did not have time to escape anywhere, because he was hit in the back. When the criminals learned that Yu did not have a bodyguard, they set off to catch up with the departed heroes. The villains decided to punish Lee Sing-hee for trying to deceive them by pretending to be a security guard. And the Miss began to ask the attackers to stop beating the innocent guy. One of the attackers told the girl that they would release the seller if she stayed. The young man understood that he could not just give up, and that something had to be done. And then Lee Sing-hee remembered the golden pill and decided to use it. Thanks to this potion, the young man became much stronger, and blows no longer hurt him. With the help of the resulting power, the seller was easily able to repel the attackers. Yu didn't understand what happened to her savior, so she tried to find out from him. But there was no time to talk, and Lee Sing-hee asked the Miss to call the police. Although there was only one seller, he calmly fought with four criminals. When the police arrived, Captain Zhang suggested that the attackers might be the ones kidnapping the girls. However, the young man did not receive a reward for capturing the villains, as he himself had hoped. But Yu was very grateful to the young man, and even wanted to be protected by a person like Lee Sing-hee. And then the seller replied that in this case, he could become Mrs. Bodyguard, and it would not cost much. After this, the heroine apologized for not recognizing the guy, but he replied that many do not know his name. Lee Sing-hee noticed that the beauty was covering her nose with her hand the whole way, so he asked her about it. It turned out that it was all due to the fact that some strange smell was coming from the cellar. At night, the young man thought first about Yu, and then about his ex-girlfriend, because he still hoped that she would return to him. And then the young man noticed that someone had written to him at such a late time. The message was sent by a person under the name Liu Xun, and there was a photograph in it. It turned out that in this photo were Wang Wei and Zhang Xiaojun, who were Li Xinghe's classmates. The seller was angry with this photo, and the guy was ready to settle scores with the couple. And then the young man realized that the next day there would be a reunion of graduates, and then he would meet with the offenders. However, the young man still had an unpleasant odor, so he could not go anywhere. Therefore, Lee Sing-hee decided to ask the gods how he could get rid of this stench. The hero was told that the smell should go away on its own in a few days, and in order to get rid of the smell faster, you had to buy an odor pill. However, it was very expensive. It turned out that in order to earn merit points, you can sell magic weapons. But this news did not make the guy very happy, because he only had mobile phones. Then the young man decided that he still needed to try to sell mobile phones in the world of the gods. Immediately after this, the flower fairy wrote to the young man, offering a scent pill for the phone. The hero only had to scan the phone and then exchange it. Although the seller was not sure that everything would work out, after some time the pill ended up in his hand. This potion smelled much more pleasant than the previous one, so Lee Sing-hee calmly used it. Meanwhile, one very interesting meeting took place at the Chaeyong Hotel in Wenan. To be more precise, there was Mr. Zhang, who was asked what his secret to success was. The young man explained that everything was thanks to his father's millions and hard work, and then presented a gift for all women. The gift turned out to be the latest skincare set from a well-known company, which everyone was happy about. Therefore, the girls began to tell Wang Wei that her current boyfriend was much better than Li Xinghe. And then Yu came to the meeting and said that the seller was much better than Mr. Zhang. It turned out that the company where the girl works could be acquired by Xiaojun, to which Yu replied that in that case she would resign. After that, the main character himself joined his classmates. The rich man, meanwhile, told the beauty that she should keep her promise to quit. And the first thing the young man did as soon as he walked in was pay attention to Wang Wei and Xiaojun. Zhang immediately rushed to introduce his new girlfriend to Li Xinghe, because she was the salesman's ex. Containing his aggression, the young man wished the couple happiness. Xiaojun began to tell the guy that he was poor, so no one would love him. However, the young man was surrounded by a large number of girls who talked about how beautiful their classmate was. Zhang didn't understand why he wasn't the center of attention, so he asked Guo Yun to teach Li Xinghe a lesson. And while the main character was calmly communicating with women, he was immediately attacked by Guo Yun. The blow was so strong that the young man began to bleed. Xiaojun was happy about this because now everyone should focus all their attention on him. His friend immediately ran up to Li Xinghe, asking if the seller was okay. Zhang said that if the guy still had strength, he could fight back. The young man, of course, did not miss this chance to hit his opponent. Moreover, Xiaojun asked for it himself, so he received a strong attack. Although Li Xinghe had no money, he could still teach Zhang a lesson. The seller began to attack Xiaojun again, but then someone stopped him. It was Wang Wei who asked the main character to stop beating him. Then Li Xinghe actually stopped hitting Zhang, but hit his ex instead. After this, the young man said that from now on he would always be on his own. The next day, the guy noticed that all the injuries he received in the evening had disappeared. And then the seller noticed that although he takes a hot shower in hot weather, he is cold. After this, the main character felt that he was not the only one in the room. The man noticed the ghost, and frightened began to run away from it. Li Xinghe shouted to the creature to stay away from him, because he was communicating with gods from the immortal world. The ghostly girl asked the young man if he really saw her, to which he answered positively. After this, the ghost practically attacked the seller, knocking him onto the sofa. It turned out that the stranger came because of the scent of the main character, which appeared because of the pill. But the guy understood that he could not allow this creature to pursue him. Therefore, the man decided to write to the fairy, who was playing on her new phone at the time. The goddess didn't care about the seller's problems, so in the end she just sent him some video. And then the young man forgot about all his problems, because the flower fairy turned out to be very beautiful. But then the guy remembered that a ghost was sitting next to him, so he asked for help again. It turned out that the guy needed a manual on spiritual strength. However, this book was very expensive. The young man could also ask the Monkey King for this book, but even here he would have to pay. After this, Li Xinghe asked the goddess if she knew the composition of the scent pill. The young man decided to make such a pill, but without the side effects of ghosts. And then the fairy replied that you can simply not use yellow spring flowers, but then the effectiveness of the potion will decrease. Then the heroes agreed that the goddess would provide all the ingredients, and the man, in turn, would in the future give her 10% of the proceeds after selling phones. After this, the main character wrote to the Monkey King asking for a manual on spiritual power. In exchange, Li Xinghe offered a phone, so God quickly agreed. After this, the young man received medicinal materials from the fairy. Using the formula, a dozen pills can be prepared from these herbs. So this time the seller will not only be able to help Yu Wangchu, but also make a fortune. After some time, the Monkey King sent the guy a manual, while he waited for his phone. Then the young man, with a familiar gesture, scanned his phone to send it to God. It turned out that the Monkey King sent an electronic version of the book, and the young man clicked on using it. After this, something incomprehensible happened, and the main character seemed to lose consciousness. Li Xinghe found himself in a place unknown to him, and various words were circling around him. The guy didn't know what all this meant, so he just decided to touch the word no. Because of this, everything around began to sparkle, blinding the main character with bright flashes. And then the seller woke up and realized that he had a very bad headache. And then the young man received a message that the first practice lesson was completed, and this really helped get rid of the ghost. With a calm soul, the main character went to the large building in which Yu's company was located. Zhang, meanwhile, told Mr. He that he was now demanding the acquisition of 100% ownership. And although Mr. did not want to completely sell his company, Xiaojun insisted on this, because otherwise the company would go bankrupt. After this, the secretary announced that product manager Yu Wangchu would come in on important business. However, Mr. Ho asked the girl to wait, because an important conversation was taking place. But the girl could no longer be stopped. Moreover, she came along with Li Xinghe, who had a very effective product to save the company. And at that moment, the heroes noticed that Zhang was in Mr. Ho's office. Xiaojun began to ridicule the young man, reminding him that his mobile phone store had gone bankrupt. And after that, Zhang switched to the Elan company, laughing at the fact that an ordinary seller was going to save it from bankruptcy. Mr. Ho was tired of listening to this, so he demanded that both people come to leave. After this, the girl asked the man not to force himself, because he still doesn't understand cosmetics. However, Li Xingyi was confident in his products, so he decided to simply look for another company, and then said goodbye to Yu. While returning home, the guy noticed that the flower fairy had written to him. The goddess said that 7 fairies were interested in buying a phone, and then reminded them of their percentage of sales. After the conversation, the young man noticed how an old man fell next to him. Therefore, Li Xinghe immediately made fun of helping the elderly man get up, and a woman passing by told the seller not to mess with this old man, because he had some strange clouds over his head. But the young man, in turn, simply began asking his grandfather about his condition. The young man asked the old man if he could hear someone talking at night, even though there was no one nearby. Then the old man was very surprised, because Li Xinghe described the reality. After this, the grandfather said that his son's company was in trouble, because some person had ruined its reputation. So the pensioner had to turn to feng shui masters, but no one helped. And then the old man said that if the guy could solve this problem, he would be rewarded. To this, the main character replied that it was his duty to help others, and then offered to accompany his grandfather home. When Li Xinghe brought the old man home, his adult son would meet him there. And then it turned out that the seller knew this man, because it was Mr. He. After this, the young man asked to look around, and he was allowed to do so. The main character began to look for evil force, saying that no one could hide from him. As a result, the young man called on the power of heaven and earth to destroy the evil that was in the house. And then a terrible monster appeared in front of Li Xinghe and began to fight off the blows. Suddenly, the evil moved directly into the old man, taking away control of his body. After this, the old man changed a lot, becoming more angry and frightening. He wanted to know what happened to his father, but he in turn simply struck. The young man began to try to find out from the ghost what happened to him. And then the monster said that he should be asked how he killed the young girl. It turned out that the man understood what he was talking about, asking if he was talking about Guo Wei Wei. 6 months ago, a drunken he killed a young girl while driving, and then used vile means to avoid punishment. However, the man continued to argue that Wei Wei was herself to blame, because she crossed the red light. But the girl's ghost didn't care, and said that she wanted He Jian and his entire family to die. After this, the creature began to say that Li Xinghe would also die. The girl's resentment was very severe, so she wished death on everyone. Then the young man shouted about sacred treasures that were supposed to hear his call. Yellow sheets have started to appear around the ghost, and they can know the soul and seal the spirit. Using his strength, the young man was able to calm the raging monster. As a result, the dark smoke began to turn into the girl's head, which the young man immediately grabbed. He Jin was grateful to the young man for saving his father. After this, the man promised that he would pray for Guo Wei Wei every year. However, the main character was upset that he was not rewarded, although this was promised. After a while, there was a loud noise in Li Xinghe's mobile phone store. It turned out that the culprit was 2 ghosts who were arguing with each other. So the guy realized that ghost women cause more trouble than ordinary women. To resolve their dispute, the girls went to the main character, because one of them believed that since she appeared first, she should be more important. The young man understood that his spiritual strength was too small, so each time he held back the monsters only for a while. So Li Xinghe decided to come up with something before the creatures drove him to death. Then the man wrote that whoever helps him deal with ghosts will receive a phone. The guy was immediately answered by Zhang Tianxi, who was ready to help. But first he wanted to get a phone number. The seller immediately sent the phone, and in return received a set called the 5 Yin Contemplation Array. Then the main character activated this set, and a dome immediately formed around the ghosts. The array really worked well, so the young man can now sleep peacefully. The next morning, He came to the young man's store, which surprised him. The man told the seller that he was inviting him to the company, because Li Xinghe wanted to cooperate. The young man noted that He had recently kicked him out, but today he was inviting him. Then Jian asked the seller for forgiveness, and then added that Li Xinghe could be trusted after yesterday. After the apology, the main character replied that in this case, there is no need to remember the past. At the Yilan Company building, Mr. Zhang tried to dissuade He from trusting Li Xinghe, but was unsuccessful. The seller demonstrated his recipe. However, Xiaojun snatched it from the wrong hands. Mr. Zhang laughed at what the young man came up with, and then simply threw away the paper. However, the seller knew that this recipe was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, so Xiaojun couldn't just throw it away. Then his classmates bet that if this recipe really worked, Zhang would give the young man 1,000,000. But if nothing works, then Li Xinghe will have to apologize on his knees and then leave the city forever. And then the main character suggested to his opponent that if he loses, he will not only pay money, but also run naked down the street. It was already too late to retreat back, so the young people agreed to all the conditions. 4 hours had already passed since the argument, and there was still no evidence that the recipe was working. But then Yu came into the office with the words that the sample was completely ready. Mr. He noted that the product brought did not look like a cosmetic product at all. To this, the hero replied that you first need to take 100 grams of ginseng powder and 50 milliliters of warm water, then boil for 3 minutes, and the effect will be visible at the first use. But Li Xinghe shouldn't have rejoiced ahead of time, because it was still unclear whether it would work. In the end, they decided that they needed to test the product on a cleaning lady, so they ran to look for her. Aunt Q easily agreed to the test, because her face was already scary, so she had nothing to lose. While applying the product, the cleaning lady noted that it smelled very tasty. The aroma was so strong that everyone else smelled it too. But then the men heard some screaming, so they rushed to help. It turned out that it was Q who was shouting, and Yu was sitting next to her, asking her aunt to open her eyes. Mister, he immediately began to say that he was very sorry, and the company was willing to bear all the losses. However, the woman did not scream from pain, but on the contrary, she liked the remedy. The cleaning lady became so beautiful that none of those present immediately believed it. While Zhang was talking about how this was impossible, he accidentally stumbled and began to fall. However, Li Xinghe caught his classmate, reminding him of the terms of the contract. Xiao Jun understood that now there was no way he could get away with it, because the recipe really turned out to be working. Therefore, the loser immediately transferred the promised money to his opponent. Then the seller and Mr. He began to rejoice, because finally they would be rich. But Zhang was not so strong once, because he also had to fulfill the second part of the agreement. The young man was so happy that he continued to admire the 1,000,000 even after returning home. The main character was already planning that he would buy even more phones with this money. And then Li Xinghe realized that he would spend all this money very quickly. However, the boy will start receiving half of the income when the cream hits the market, and this will become the guy's main income. And then the fairy wrote to the main character with information that 7 more fairies want to buy a phone from him. The young man then asked the goddess if she knew any celebrities who could advertise his cream. Then the flower fairy sent a video, which she offered to post on the internet. Having completed his communication with the goddess, Li Xinghe noticed that Liu Xun was now calling him. It turned out that the main character's classmate was celebrating his birthday, so he invited his friend to a blues bar in the evening. But the salesman said that Liu Xun deserves better, so they should go to Diamond Bar. However, the young man did not appreciate his friend's offer, because that bar is one of the most expensive in the city, but Li Xinghe insisted on it. Therefore, they decided to celebrate their birthday at the Diamond Bar. However, the alcohol in this establishment was so expensive that Liu Xun could not afford anything. Then one of the guests told the young man not to try to pretend to be rich. And the girls who came with the birthday boy were not happy either. The stranger who reprimanded Liu Xun introduced himself as Chao Heng, who runs several cosmetic stores, and he invited the birthday boy's girlfriends to his table. The girls really left the young man because he had no money at all, but the young man continued to wait for his friend, hoping that he had a way out of the situation. And then someone touched Liu Xun on the shoulder and asked why he was sitting alone. It turned out that it was Li Xinghe who finally reached his comrade. Then the birthday boy explained that all the guests had gone to a richer man. The main character realized that he couldn't leave everything like that, and something had to be done. After some time, the host said that table 66 won the most expensive bottle of wine. It turned out that it was Liu Xun's table, and the winnings were immediately brought to him. After this, the waiter was ordered to call the most beautiful woman to the table. Meanwhile, the girls who originally came with the birthday boy did not understand what was happening. As a result, the beauty came to the winner to give him something to drink, as Li Xinghe ordered. However, this was prevented by Mr. Liu's girlfriend, who immediately began to swear at the girl and the birthday boy who had come. In the end, the main character explained that it was he who called the beauty to the table, so his friend was not to blame for this. Then Yin hastened to apologize to Liu Xun, because she had misunderstood everything. The classmate was very grateful to Li Xinghe for that, because the guy turned out to be a really good friend. After the evening ended, Cao Heng approached the seller, unhappy that he had been insulted. However, the young man did not want to listen to the stranger's discontent, so he said that he was very busy. But then Mr. Cao's guards shouted that they needed to kill the young man and not talk. The main character didn't even bat an eyelid, because now he had enough strength to fight. Li Xinghe calmly defeated all opponents without even getting hurt. One of their security guards even started calling the police to report that he had been attacked. And immediately after that, the man received a blow to the face without having time to dodge. Officer Zhang arrived at the scene and asked Li Xinghe why he was always getting into trouble. Then the young man noticed that a dark fog was circling above the policeman. After that, the officer said that the case of the disappearance of the girls had not yet been solved, so he was a little annoyed. But the hero had to worry about himself because Chao Heng could sue him. And then one of the guards called Mr. He, asking him for help. Jin was unhappy that someone dared to cross the path of his people. But after that, Mr. He learned that the incident happened to Li Xinghe. And then the man officially told his security guard that he was fired. The next day, Mr. He apologized to the salesman for failing to keep track of his subordinates. The young man said that everything was fine with him, but he just didn't want to pay the medical expenses of the guards. And then a stranger burst into the main character's room while he was talking on the phone. The girl suddenly burst in and asked the seller if his name was Li Xinghe. Then the young man ended the conversation and confirmed that this was indeed his name. The stranger introduced herself as Tang Xiaoxi, and then asked if the young man could exorcise ghosts. The main character wondered where the girl knew this information. Miss Tan admitted that He Ye, who is Mr. He's father, told her about this. But then Li Xinghe said that he was not a monk to exorcise ghosts. Then the girl said that she was the daughter of Tak Gaoyi, the president of Tang Group, and her grandfather was sick with something. It turned out that Xiaoxi is a celebrity, which interested the young man. As a result, Miss Tan said that she was ready to pay a lot of money to exorcise the ghosts. In addition, the girl promised to give the guy shares in their company if he really helped, so he agreed. Therefore, Li Xinghe immediately hurried to get ready to go to the rescue. But Miss Tan said that there was no need to gather, because the right place was in the city of Wenan. And after that, the girl asked the hero to demonstrate his strength, because at first glance, the seller did not look like a master. Then the young man began to show some strange gestures that Miss did not understand. It turned out that the young man called to him a ghost whom Xiaoxi had not seen. Due to the presence of otherworldly forces, the girl began to feel trembling throughout her body. Suddenly, the main character thought about showing Miss Tang ghosts. Therefore, the young man used the psychic mirror technique. Xiaoxi didn't understand what was happening, so the seller asked her to look around. In disbelief, Miss Tang actually began to look around her, and then she saw a ghost. The beauty was very scared, but Li Xinghe only laughed at her. Because of the ghosts, Xiaoxi began to try to escape, but the seller did not have time to stop her. But then the girl lost her balance and fell right in front of the main character. However, in the end, the young man managed to prove his abilities, so the miss immediately transferred part of the promised amount to him. After that, the beauty began to leave, saying that she would wait at the intersection. When Xiaoxi came out, Li Xinghe couldn't help but shout about how he had made a fortune. But the girl did not understand how her grandfather could recommend such a stingy person. The stranger, using the same magic as the main character, appeared in front of a large number of people. The man also talked about how heaven and earth would help him destroy evil spirits. Looking at this were Tang Xiaoxi's second uncle, Tang Gaoqian, Tang Gaoyi, and Tang Xiaoxi's father. Some of the guests said that the old man would not be able to recover, so they already wanted to divide the inheritance. It turned out that the stranger, who turned out to be Master Tao Xingming, was invited by the second brother. And the payment wasn't even important, because the children just wanted to help their father while they had a chance. The master, meanwhile, continued to use his spells, trying to drive out evil spirits. And then the second brother turned to Tao Xingming, asking if the end would come soon. After this, the master became distracted and looked in the direction from where they were addressing him. However, only the beautiful girl attracted all the man's attention. Tao Xingming liked the beauty so much that it almost knocked him off his feet. The master even started bleeding from his nose, but he explained this by saying that he was wounded by ghosts. Tao Xingming assured those gathered that the devil was sitting in this place, so they needed to be careful. As a result, the master managed to catch the monster that was causing harm to the family. But after that, the man added that the elder was very weak and old, so his life now depended only on doctors. And then Li Xinghe and Miss Tan entered the room, who immediately stopped the master. The father immediately began asking his daughter where she had been, and who she had brought with her. And the seller at that time said that Master Tao was just a very good actor. Then everyone started whispering that Tang Xiaoxi might also just be a liar who wanted to get his hands on the inheritance. After this, the second brother demanded that Tao Xingming explain everything. However, the master only reminded that he defeated the devil in front of everyone. The young man became interested in what the captured ghost was like. Approaching the animal, Li Xinghe shouted for the psychic mirror technique to dissipate. And then, in the place of the terrible devil, a cute dog appeared, which no longer seemed like a monster. Thus, the seller was able to prove to everyone that what was standing in front of them was not a master, but a liar. The young man thought that Tao was using high-level techniques, but it turned out that it was low-level illusion magic. These words offended the man, and he said that he would now show everyone his strength. Since Xingming started working, he has received many awards, so he cannot be compared to a salesman. However, no one listened to the master anymore, because everyone was interested in Li Xinghe. And then Tao decided that since the seller knew everything, then let him tell everyone why Elder Tang was sick. The main character responded to this that everything is too simple, because the elder is simply too old. But the master did not expect that the young man would actually dare to say this. Then Miss Tan asked the seller if he was really telling the truth just now. And after that, the young man swore with everything he had because he was confident in his words. Some began to talk about saving time and dividing all property, and others decided to find the old man, because there was a chance that he had already died during this time. But then the old man's son demanded that everyone calm down, because many behaved terribly. And then Tang Gaoyi was asked not to deceive himself, because the old man had very little left. The others began to say that today's ritual was just a show put on by the second brother. And then it turned out that Tao Xingming was invited so that the old man would hand over the entire territory in Hong Kong in gratitude. This is how the master learned that he was just a tool for display. Then Xiaoxi entered the conversation and began to scold everyone for not caring about the elder. Li Xinghe began to try to stop the old man's granddaughter, asking her not to be so impulsive. And so the young man recalled that he only spoke about the elder's condition, but he did not say that he could not save him. Miss Tan hopefully asked the main character if he could save her grandfather. The seller understood that he had to do this, because he had already been paid 10 million. And then the master told the young man not to boast, because prolonging life goes against the laws of nature. The hero wants to try to resist nature, and then Black and White appeared next to him, who were spirits that take away human souls. Then the young man realized that time was running out, so he needed to be faster. Therefore, the poet needed to help the elder as soon as possible before he was taken away. It seemed to the Bai girl that the man saw him and Hay, but the black one replied that people could not see them. And then the young man, whom the spirits had just discussed, burst into his room. The young man began shouting to the white and black men to stop. Then Hay asked how the guy dared to interfere with them, and the girl was only happy because she was right. Bai noted that there were no traces of ghostly energy on Li Xinghe, and the young man generally did not look like a ghost. The master also followed the seller and asked not to put on a show because there are no blacks and whites here. The man said that he would now subjugate Yang Wan, who was the ruler of the kingdom of the dead, and this arrogance offended the spirits. Therefore Black and White decided to punish Tao for insulting Mr. Yang Wang. And then the master said that if Li Xinghe stopped the Black and White, he would worship the seller. However, the young man did not have time to do anything because the spirits beat Tao too much. And then the main character noticed that the elder was already dying, so something had to be done urgently, and Bai asked the guy to cooperate with them and not interfere with their work. However, Li Xinghe only asked the spirits not to touch the old man, and then the seller was distracted by Miss Tan, who asked what the young man was doing. Xiaoxi didn't understand who the main character was talking to and what was going on. But at this moment it was not the best time to answer questions, so the girl was asked to leave the room and prevent others from entering. But almost everyone was unhappy that they had to listen to a stranger. They began to accuse the girl of simply wanting to take all the old man's property for herself. Miss Tang didn't understand why her close-knit family had become like this, because she just wanted to save her grandfather. And then the girl was helped by her father, who ordered everyone to do as Mr. Li says. Until the seller leaves the room, everyone is prohibited from entering there. The main character, meanwhile, asked the spirits to let the old man go. However, everything was not so simple, so Black and White could not let the elder go, ignoring the laws of the underworld. And then the young man noted that the old man's soul did not yet completely belong to the spirits, because they could not take it away so quickly. But even in this case, the life of the elder ends, so even the gods will not be able to help here. Therefore, the young man dared to stop the Black and White, trying to take their souls. It really wasn't that simple, because the seller didn't know what to do now. The guy's actions made Bai and Hay laugh that they even wanted to take the man with them. But these words did not frighten the main character at all, which surprised the spirits. It turned out that the guy asked the gods for advice. However, they could not say anything important. And then Zhang Tianxi wrote that you could use the resurrection pill, but it had a high price. God demanded 500,000 merit points from the main character for the potion. The young man had no choice, so he had to agree to the deal. Therefore, Li Xinghe still acquired the supreme resurrection pill. As always, this potion, striking with its radiance, immediately appeared in the hands of the seller. Black and White were amazed that the young man had this pill, because it was lost several centuries ago. Then the spirits decided to stop Li Xinghe until he gave the potion to the old man. But it was too late, because the elder quickly swallowed the pill given to him. After this, the young man apologized to the Black and White because he ruined all their plans. He promised the guy that he would report this case to management, and Li Xinghe would have problems. When Tao woke up, he began to ask the seller to take the master as his student. However, the main character did not want to teach the smug man anything. After this, Mr. Tang himself woke up, which made Xiaoxi very happy. The heroes started a dialogue, and the old man asked the young man, whom he considered promising, if he was married. Then the young man replied that for now he was an ordinary bachelor. For some unknown reason, this news made the elder very happy. And then the granddaughter told her grandfather that he should just pay for the help and not ask unnecessary questions. Unexpectedly, the guy's phone vibrated, because he received a message from Wang Chu. The girl wrote that she was grabbed and held in a car, so the young man rushed to help. Then Xiaoxi ran after the seller to take him to the right place. Already in the car, Miss Tang asked the seller how much Wang Chu was important to him. The main character responded to this that there was nothing serious between them. And while Xiaoxi was explaining why she even asked about this, the young man looked into the next car. Then the young man realized that his girlfriend was there. The intruder's car rushed by very quickly, so Miss Tang also had to speed up. The girl performed a dangerous stunt because the main character told her to catch up with the black car. However, Xiaoxi herself was not sure that they were pursuing criminals, because she did not notice who was in the cabin. Li Xinghe explained everything by saying that he had improved all his physical indicators, including his eyesight, so he definitely saw everything. As a result, Xiaoxi was still able to find the black car of the attackers. But it was already too late because there was no one inside the car. Therefore, the heroes decided to go to the house next to which the car was parked. Although the girl was worried that this would be illegal entry into someone else's house, she still went along with the seller. When friends finally came in, they noticed women's clothes that were just lying on the floor. The young man decided that this might be somehow connected with the case of the disappearance of the girls. And then, unexpectedly, the heroes were surrounded by a group of criminals who did not scare the seller at all. One of the attackers ordered the guy to be killed and the girl to be captured. Then Xiaoxi decided that she could distract the villains, and the young man would have to run away at that time. However, he abandoned this plan. The criminals attacked all together, but the young man calmly fought them off. But everything was not so simple, because one of the attackers turned out to have a pistol. The young man was not at a loss and asked the man where they hid the girl that they had recently caught. Unfortunately, the seller was in no position to ask questions. Xiaoxi also reminded the guy of this, saying that if Li Xinghe was going to take risks, then they would both die. And then the main character invited the attacker to make a deal. Namely, the young man offered to exchange the kidnapped girl for the one who came with him. These words shocked Xiaoxi, because she did not expect this from the young man at all. The guy began to praise Miss in front of the villain, talking about how beautiful she was. However, the man responded that if Li Xinghe wants to save his life, then 2 girls will not be enough. The villain invited the young man to join their organization. And then the seller would not only remain alive, but also become rich. Then the main character began to talk about how he had always dreamed of joining some gang. So Li Xinghe swore to the attacker that he was willing to serve them. The girl, looking at this whole performance, thought only about how disgusting it was. And the man, in turn, began to laugh, saying that the young man was smart for speaking like that. And while the criminal was rejoicing, the seller managed to intercept his hand with the gun. The young man began to turn the villain's hand so that the aim was not on the girl. However, the attacker still managed to shoot the main character. Miss Tan immediately rushed to help the guy who was afraid for him, and then his accomplice ran to the criminal Liang and said that the police had arrived. Therefore, the villains began to run away, leaving the girl upstairs, because there was no time for her. Then, Xiaoxi asked the seller if he really wanted to give it to that scoundrel. The young man said that he just wanted to distract the criminal. However, this did not save him from being hit by the girl. And then the main character said that if he was hit again, he would definitely die. Suddenly, Miss Tang had an idea that Li Xinghe was not so bad. After that, the heroes went in search of Wang Chu, and eventually found her in one of the rooms. Yu was very grateful to the young man for saving her from the kidnappers, and Xiaoxi then thought that she was simply superfluous in this place, because they didn't even pay attention to her. Unfortunately, the police were unable to catch the attackers because they managed to escape. But based on the evidence found, we can say with confidence that those are the people who were involved in the kidnapping of the girls. While Captain Zhang was speaking, the protagonist noted that the black fog above the man's head had become thicker. In a more relaxed atmosphere, the girls were able to meet and introduce themselves to each other. Wang Chu immediately noticed how beautiful Miss Tang was, with her perfect figure and snow-white skin. And then the girl decided that although Xiaoxi was cute, Yu was not going to give in to her. A verbal skirmish ensued between the heroines about who was more beautiful. At first, the girls talked calmly, but with each sentence they said it became more and more like an argument. As a result, the rivals agreed that they were serious opponents for each other. And then the girls remembered Li Xingye, who was wounded and was waiting for help. After this, the young man was sent to the #1 hospital in Wenan City. The young man had been there for the whole day, so during this time the doctors managed to remove the bullet from his body, and he was already on the mend. The main character asked the staff where the girls who brought him were now. It turned out that the heroines left in the morning while the young man was fast asleep, and they did not want to disturb him. Then the nurse told the guy that he needed to stay in the hospital for at least 3 more days. However, thanks to the pills, the seller could recover overnight. But Li Xingyi decided to just pretend to be sick and take a break from everything. In the end, the rest didn't turn out to be very long, because the goddess called the guy. And the woman called because many fairies wanted to buy phones from the young man. Since the seller could not leave the hospital, he decided to send Liu Shun. So the young man called his friend and asked him to bring him the phones. While waiting for Li, the hero decided to watch TV, on which they were talking about a popular girl. And then the guy realized that the one for whom the whole internet was crazy was the goddess of flowers. It was then that it turned out that it was Li Xinghe who uploaded the video of the goddess online. The fairy dance became so popular that everyone began to create massive plagiarisms of it. The young man learned that in this way, he became an internet celebrity. Everyone was wondering who the dancing girl was, and who Sini, who had already been nicknamed the god of PR, was. The flower fairy became so popular that even the stars began to imitate her. Video revelations have even begun to appear about whether the goddess has undergone plastic surgery. The video that the young man posted received a large number of views and comments. Therefore, the guy thought that next time he should not ask the fairy for help. After that, a friend of his came to Li Xingye and brought phones. Then Liu Shun noticed that his friend was wounded, which made him very angry, and he was ready to punish all those responsible. The main character explained everything by saying that he simply fell into a hole last night. After this, the young man asked the seller to be more careful in future. And then the young man said that he had a job that paid well. And then Li Xinghe suggested to his friend that he try to get a job as a sales director at the Elan company, because there was not enough of him there. At this time, a girl named Yue was walking down the corridor with a phone in her hands. The heroine was streaming and talking about how she would finally be discharged tomorrow. But then Liu Shun, who was in a hurry, crashed into Yue, so he did not notice the man. After this, the young man apologized, saying that he was just in a hurry. However, apologies alone seemed not enough for the girl, so she was already thinking about calling the police. Yue then grabbed the phone and started complaining that she had just been knocked down. Everyone began to write angry comments towards the young man, threatening him. Liu Shun offered to take the heroine to the doctor if she felt unwell. But then the girl turned her phone camera towards the young man, saying that it was he who hit her. The guy tried to explain everything, but commentators were already writing about how they would punish him. And Yue said that if men feel sorry for her, then they can pay for her medical bills. Then the young man realized that the girl was simply using him to attract attention. Therefore, Liu Shun decided to take the heroine's phone in order to clearly clarify the situation. To this, Yue began to scream that she was being bullied harshly. Of course, a large number of people came running to the noise, and everyone took the girl's side. In addition, one of those who came running turned out to be a big fan of little Yue. Therefore, the young man's action greatly angered those around him. And while all these showdowns were going on, Yue was filming it all on her phone because her stream continued. The heroine already imagined that this video would become a hit because many people saw it. In the meantime, the seller sent the last phone, so the work was finished. But the guy couldn't rest, because he heard some screams from the corridor. It seemed to the young man that his friend was calling for help, so he decided to check. Therefore, Li Xingye ran out of the ward and headed towards a large crowd of people. And then the main character saw Liu Shun, who was wearing cosmetics. The stranger said that the boy should be turned into a girl, so that he would no longer pester Yue. Therefore, the seller immediately began shouting for his friend to be released. And then it turned out that the unknown person was a patient in the psychiatric department, so the doctors soon took him away. Finally, the man began to shout that he loved little Yue very much. Although Liu Shun was fine, his appearance made him very upset. Li Xinghe tried to reassure his friend, saying that there was nothing wrong with his face. It was just disgusting to look at. And after that, the main character tried to stop the girl, because of whom this all happened. And Yue answered the guy that Liu Shun deserved such an attitude, because he pushed her first. However, the young man began to demand that the heroine apologize to his classmate. And then the girl turned the camera to Lee Sinha, calling him an accomplice of the second bully. In the comments, everyone immediately began to write that the seller was a disgusting person. So the heroine believed that she did not have to apologize, because everyone was on her side. After this, Yue added that her fans are always ready to deal with her offenders. The young man decided to teach this girl a lesson, because she was sure that since she was popular, she could do what she wanted. And then Li Xinghe noticed a camera that had been filming what was happening all this time. After this, the main character came up with a plan to teach this girl a lesson. After some time, Xiaoxi brought her friend a flash drive containing video from surveillance cameras. Miss found information on the internet that Yue is a popular streamer, so the video will not affect her in any way. And then Li Xinghe told his friend that she shouldn't worry, because there was already a plan. To this, Xiaoxi replied that she was not worried at all, but that her grandfather had forced her to help the seller. After this, the girl remembered that the elder gave the young man a gift. To the surprise of the young man, this surprise turned out to be the keys to a Mercedes. The main character was glad that he finally had a car. After that, Li Xinghe noticed that someone started calling him on his phone. It turned out that it was a friend of the seller who said that the smartphone store had been destroyed. The guy was angry, so he asked Lu Xun who dared to do this. And then it became known that the Yue fans were to blame, so Li Xinghe should have hidden for a while. However, the young man was not going to hide, but wanted to take revenge for his store. And since Yue fans can allow you to do this, then the main character will not be afraid to be rude. Li Xinghe wrote that he is the god of PR, and then added that he wants to show everyone the truth. And after that, the seller posted a video that showed that Liu Xun was not to blame. Little Yue meanwhile was on the show as a rising star. The presenter suggested that the girl look on the internet to see the reaction of fans. However, what everyone saw was not words of love and support, as expected. Everyone on the internet insulted the little girl and wrote that she was shameless. Wei didn't understand why her fans were so up in arms against her. Then the presenter said to suspend the release due to some technical reasons. The little girl began to apologize to Shu, because she didn't know that this could happen. But this did not calm the presenter, and she began to scold the girl for angering the god of PR. Due to the incident, Yue's account was blocked on the platform. So all the little girl had to do was apologize to the PR god and ask to delete the video. And the girl will have to do this at any cost, otherwise her career will be ruined. In addition, Yue may try to attract the PR god to their company to promote it. Then the little girl decided to prove to Li Xinghe that she was not so easy to break. The main character, in turn, continued to rest in the hospital room. But then his peace was disturbed by a nurse who unexpectedly came to see him. The seller noticed that the girl's usually neutral outfit had changed. After this, the nurse said that she was going to take the young man's temperature. But then the young man remembered that his temperature had not been taken last evening, which means it was not required. However, the nurse continued to insist that it was better to find out his temperature. And then the girl stumbled a little, falling right on the main character and apologizing to him. After this, the seller thought that the nurse's voice sounded familiar, so he took off her mask. That's how Li Xinghe realized that in front of him was not just a girl, but little Yue herself. The heroine began to apologize to the god of PR, saying that she was very sorry. Also, the girl began to talk about how she would do anything to be forgiven. The young man began to think that Yue's sin was not that great, so it could be forgiven. However, the guy still didn't want to accept the apology so easily. And then Li Xinghe noticed that the little girl had brought a camera to set him up. Of course, after this, the seller demanded an explanation from the heroine. The girl admitted that she wanted to take a couple of shots and blackmail the PR god with them. Now the main character definitely didn't need an apology, and besides, he could call the police. And then Yue said that because of this she could be fired, and then she would commit suicide. To this the young man replied that he would never forgive the girl for what she did. However, the seller still asked to take a couple of photos of the baby so that she would become popular. The young man noted that the heroine herself tried to set him up, and now she bows to justice. But then the dialogue was interrupted, because someone called Yue's phone. It turned out that it was Sister Shu who asked the girl where she was. The woman reminded the little girl that her father was in debt, her mother was in the hospital, and her brother needed money, so she had to get along with the PR god. Shu added that if Yue does not force Li Xinghe to delete the video, she may not come again. The main character listened to this entire telephone conversation until the very end. After that, Yue said that she would not bother the young man anymore. Then the seller took pity on the baby and deleted the video that exposed her, and all because Li Xinghe felt sorry for those for whom the heroine earns money. To this the girl replied that she would not thank the guy, because she would return this favor to him in the future. The main character felt sorry for Yue because she took the dirty path. The next day, the seller was already discharged from the hospital because he was already healthy. Xiaoxi came to meet Li Xinghe to help him test the donated car. The friend asked the guy if he had driven a car before, to which he responded positively. However, the young man simply did not want to embarrass himself in front of the girl. But it was still not possible to lie for long, because Li Xinghe was driving the car too fast. And then a girl walked right next to the car with a bouquet of flowers, who appeared unexpectedly. It turned out that it was not just a passerby, but the beautiful Wang Chu. The girl decided that Li Xinghe was not who she imagined him to be. Because of the salesman's behavior, Wang Chu began to think that she had fallen in love with the wrong person. At that time, the young man himself got out of the car and headed towards his girlfriend. Then Wang Chu said that she was not going to see Li Xinghe, but was just taking a walk, so she would not interfere with the date. Xiaoxi also decided to have her say, asking how the girl dared to consider her and the seller a couple. But the beauty decided that since the heroes were driving around the city in the same car, then they would definitely meet. The young man began to deny everything, saying that his girlfriend was talking nonsense. But the guy's only thought was that it's nice when two beauties fight for you. And then Xiaoxi decided that since the girl considered her and Li Xinghe a couple, then she could be teased. The rich woman handed the young man a golden card and said that he could use it. But the main character did not understand what happened to his girlfriend. As expected, this behavior of the heroes angered Wang Chu even more. So the beauty said that Li Xinghe was shameless, and then went home. And when Wang Chu left, Xiaoxi asked the guy to return her card. And after that, the girl told the seller that she would borrow his car. Thus, the main character was left with nothing and completely alone. But this did not last long, because his student came for the young man. Tao Xingming arrived to pick up his teacher from the hospital. However, Li Xinghe soon noticed that he was being taken along the wrong road, and his house was in the other direction altogether. The man admitted that he was actually planning to take his teacher to the Taoist Association's experience exchange meeting. Taoist Master Dui Zhenren and the leader of the Taoist Venanya Association Kui Gongyuan were already waiting for the young people. However, the men said that it was not worth inviting Tao Xingming. Meanwhile, the heroes had already arrived at the right place, which made the man happy. But Li Xinghe was very angry that they continued to call him a master. Then Tao said that 10 years ago he lost to his opponent, so this time he needs help. But then the conversation of the young people was interrupted by some noise coming from nearby. It turned out that someone wanted to join the Taoist Association without an invitation. The stranger insisted that he should have received an invitation. The girl did not want to let the man in, so he decided to provide evidence that she was obliged to do this. The poor thing had a strange feeling as if someone was sitting on her back, and the stranger continued to insist that he should be allowed in. But Li Xinghe was angry that the man was mocking ordinary people, so the young man decided to help the girl in need by banishing the summoned creature. This action surprised the stranger because he did not expect this from an ordinary guy. But Li Xinghe didn't care, because he just wanted to help the unfortunate woman. Tao told the unknown man that he should no longer try to harm anyone, but the stranger began to say that he simply opened the girl's eyes. However, first of all, the man harmed an ordinary person, which is prohibited. One of the association members came running to the noise and tried to find out what was happening. Therefore, the person running asked Tao who the two people arguing were. Jingming introduced Li Xinghe as his master, which interested the man. And Tao didn't know the second man, so he couldn't imagine him. The stranger said that his name was Wu Hai, and then asked to enter, although he did not have an invitation. When Wu was finally allowed to enter, he told the seller that he could enjoy the girl he had saved. The young man noticed that the yin energy was overwhelming the victim, so she urgently needed help. While the young man was treating the girl, her friend was waiting outside the door with Tao. The heroine was in awe of how young and talented Li Xinghe is. Xingming began to talk about how he also has power, and moreover, is an idol among all Taoists. And so Tao, smiling, invited the girl to get to know each other better. However, to this the heroine only replied that the man should not touch her. Li Xinghe, meanwhile, remembered that he needed to take off the victim's clothes in order to transfer his qi. The young man began trying to save the girl before it was too late. In the end, everything worked out, and the heroine woke up. But she did not understand where she was. On top of everything else, the victim did not understand where all her clothes were. The main character reassured the girl by saying that he had to undress her to save her. After this, the heroine began to say that it was very hot in the room. It turned out that because of what happened, the girl's body began to secrete hormones in huge quantities. But the victim did not listen to the guy, saying that she wanted to thank him. And while Li Xinghe called for help, his student only listened and did nothing. But then a member of the association approached Tao, asking where his master was, and then Xingming silently pointed to the door behind which the cellar was located. The young man, meanwhile, continued to ask the girl to stop, but she did not listen. Ah Tao started knocking on the door, saying that Kui Guanyuan had arrived. After that, Li Xingyi asked the men to wait a minute. When the heroes entered, they were surprised at the state of the girl. The young man explained that he simply went too far while eliminating the yin energy. The man noted to himself that in this case, Li Xingyi's strength was great. Fortunately, Tsui had a pill that could help the unfortunate girl. The main character hurried to thank the chairman, and then gave the victim medicine. When the girl woke up, she asked Li Xingyi if she had done something wrong. The seller replied that everything was fine, and then the heroine said that she would never forget his kindness. After that, all the heroes were able to go to the association meeting. Yitao introduced Li Xingyi as his teacher and true master. One of the association members called the seller a simpleton and ridiculed Jingming. The one who harmed the girl also came to the meeting, and he said that there was only garbage here, so he shouldn't have come. Tao heard these words and reminded the stranger that Li Xingyi had already taught him a lesson. The master noted that the stranger was very sharp and straightforward, so it was strange that he had not been noticed before. As a result, the old man ordered everyone to calm down and then began to announce the rules of the meeting. First, the knowledge of Taoists will be tested, after which the winner of the first round will be determined. The second round will test skills, but there are no restrictions. After this, the first round began and the master asked who wanted to be first. Then one of the association members volunteered, and all that remained was to find him an opponent. Tao raised his hand after the first, attracting everyone's attention. The old man remembered that Jingming was ridiculed last time, and he wants to disgrace himself again. However, Tao raised his hand not for himself, but for his master, saying that it was Li Xingyi who wanted to participate. It turned out that Jingming decided this without discussing it with the young man himself, which angered him. As a result, the main character had no choice, so he had to go to his opponent. The association member thought that he was lucky because he had come across a stupid guy. After this, the man asked Li Xingyi if he knew how many worlds there were. Everyone was surprised at how simple the question was for the young man. But the old man thought that this is not as simple as it seems at first glance. However, the main character eventually admitted that he did not know the answer. Everyone was shocked because Li Xingyi doesn't even know the basics. But then, the young man shouted that the others did not know the exact answer. The only thing we can be sure of is that other worlds exist. But it is not at all a fact that their ancestors learned all the secrets of this universe. No one has studied the worlds themselves, so they cannot give a correct answer as to how many of them exist. Everyone thought that this sounded logical, which meant that Li Xingyi was a sage. And Tao was once again convinced that it was not in vain that he became the young man's student. However, the opponent began to shout that the seller was delusional, and his answer would not be counted. But the master argued with the members of the association, saying that the answer does not have to be standard. As a result, it was decided to consider this round a draw. And after that, the exchange of knowledge ended. After this, the competitors moved on to the second round, namely, the skill test. A stranger was carefully watching everything that was happening, thinking that Li Xingyi was very interesting. In the next challenge, players had to lift an object into the air. Competitors were given items to choose from and could use any skill. Tao shared with his teacher that last time the old man managed to lift the stove. This means that the main character will also have to lift the stove in order to win. The young people were asked who wants to show their strength first. Gao Shan responded again, saying that he wanted to show his brothers his strength. The man began to try to lift the peachwood dagger, and Gao Shan, who used all his strength, almost managed to lift the weapon. However, the player was not experienced enough to complete the job. After him, there were many more people who also wanted to show their strength. All the heroes gave their best, and many managed to lift objects of varying weights. As a result, the bar was raised so high that only great masters could win. And then Tao suggested that his teacher try it, but he was already tired of this association. After that, the stranger who had been standing at a distance all this time decided to join the battle. The unknown person called all the masters weak, which greatly insulted them. Then the man walked up to the heaviest object to prove that he was the strongest. But then Tao shouted that his teacher was 1,000,000 times stronger than the stranger. However, the man did not listen to anyone, but simply lifted the stove, which was very heavy. But Li Xingyi suspected that something was wrong with the stranger. It turned out that the man was cheating, using the spirit furnace to raise it. The stranger said that his performance had come to an end, and then asked if there were anyone else interested. And since no one wanted to go against the man, he was practically declared the winner. Meanwhile, the main character did nothing, but simply watched what was happening. But the stranger rejoiced, calling everyone present trash. Then the master decided to enter the competition to try to defeat the impudent man. Everyone was confident in the old man, so he began to try to lift the stove. However, after some time, it began to seem to those present that the master would not succeed. But despite everything, the old man still began to gradually lift the heavy object. Unfortunately, the master succeeded for a split second, and then the thing fell, and the old man felt bad. The stranger emphasized that the old man was not at all the same as he was before. The impudent man then continued to mock the members of the association, because he considered himself the strongest. Then Li Xinghe finally gathered his strength and told Tao that he would try to challenge him. The young man went to the largest stove to raise it in front of everyone. However, the others were not happy that some guy was going to defend the honor of the Taoists. The seller decided to resort to the spiritual power manual to figure out how to pick up the item.